Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this episode of the Russell Hobbs Show, where we talk to very interesting, dynamic, world-changing type people. Today in the studio, I'm so grateful and thankful and excited to have my good friend Mathew JC.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. So, you know, you're just a guy that's involved in many, many projects. You're very passionate and diversified. And so I want to get to know you better, and I want our audience to get to know who you are and how you got to be where you are in life. And, you know, one thing about this show, I feel like a theme is sort of emerged, and that is that a lot of people get inspired by seeing other people's life story and, you know, where they came from, what they overcame, and the obstacles and what they're passionate about and doing now. And it's really, you know, it's funny because I know a lot of trailblazers and pioneer types and productive types. And, you know, it's inspiring to hear other people's stories, where they got, where they're going. So let's start with sort of like, where'd you grow up? And what were you like growing up?
I was a nerd, and I grew up in Connecticut, a typical white picket fence family from Connecticut. But the interesting thing about us is we were the family that was in the middle of the rich area, and we should never have been in that kind of area. Not like we were poor, not like we were rich, but we went to the schools where I didn't always fit in. And what that meant is that, you know, my freshman year in high school, I was an athlete. And a small school that I went to, I was on the varsity teams of basketball, you know, soccer, baseball. And then I had to transfer to a high school called Fairfield College Preparatory School, kind of like how Notre Dame has their high schools. It's all Jesuit based. And sophomore year, I couldn't get onto one of the JV teams, yet my varsity team freshman year was playing the varsity team of that high school. So how is it that I was able to beat your varsity players, but this year I couldn't? And that was the first lesson I had with my dad going, we didn't have the money, son. And I realized that the world is set up differently. And that probably sent me down a course that probably explains who I became. And that is a storyteller. And I realized from that day that I would have to write my own story no matter where I went. I couldn't let anything, whatever your culture is or where you grow up, how you grow up financially, everyone has so many stigmas we can put each other in boxes with. I never saw myself in a box. And if I did, that box is what I drew.
So at that moment, it sort of was a reality. You were all about sports, and you ran into a wall in the sports realm. So you sort of turned and pivoted to the art realm.
Well, actually, so it started in college, actually. It was, you know, I convinced my mom that I always wanted to play guitar. I always wanted to be a musician. Always, 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 always. Not my family, though. But I convinced her to let me play in the church choir. And I was lucky, call it God, call it universe, whatever anybody wants to associate with. But the priest that ran the youth group when I was growing up was like a rock star. So he taught me Zeppelin and Kiss and all of these great songs. And it was just like, this is what I want to do. And when I got to college, I never told my parents that I took they would drop me off, you know, in the dorm rooms, you know. And a week later, my older brothers would come up and drop off my guitar and all my equipment. And the way that I got through school was I would run open mics. And an open mic sounds generic nowadays. But in early 1990s, they didn't really have open mics. That was the old school coffee house open mic. And that's how I survived through college. And that's where I made enough money to, you know, record my first album. And that's what really set me across saying, okay, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. So...
Yeah, that's very cool. So tell me, first of all, you say your priest was a rock star. Does that mean, we throw the word around, was he an ex-rock star?
He wasn't an actual rock star, but his mentality was of a rock star. You know, when you're like, oh, you're going to take guitar lessons from a priest, what are you going to learn? And this guy taught me rock and roll. That's what I mean, that he was a rock star. You know, he was the first guy that not only taught me how to tune my guitar, but my first concert was at the parish, and we were playing Led Zeppelin, Lenny Kravitz, and what was the other one? Rolling Stones. That's how I started.
That's very cool. So I wanted to clarify, though, that he wasn't like an ex-rock star that had become a priest.
No, he was always a priest.
He was a
priest that loved rock music.
Yeah, so he was a real
so where my mom
outside the box.
Exactly.
Thinking kind
my
of.
mom just saw him as a priest.
Yeah, yeah. But you
And
knew the
I was
real
lucky.
side. Yeah. You knew the backstage of the priest.
I was very lucky with that.
Okay, very good. So so I want to know, like in high school, you're walking down the hall at high school, and who was Mathew JC?
Mathew JC wasn't born yet. So right there was...
Well, what was your name at that moment?
We can just say Mathew.
Okay, so Matthew's
and I would say I was just this guy that always had a dream of being on TV and being a musician. Always. Everyone would laugh at me. I don't blame them. I mean, a movie came out about me in 2014, and literally in the movie, it makes fun of myself, realizing I can't really play guitar well, I can't really sing well, but if you met me, you would want me in your band, even though I couldn't do any of those things well. And it's like, why? And that story still, from 16 years old to 46 years old, is still the same. Still can't play well. So still can't play.
So
you want me in your band.
You're the Rudy of the rock
100%
industry.
Rudy. 100% the Rudy. That movie is still one of my favorite movies. I have been the Rudy my whole life.
Yeah.
I don't think it will ever change.
That's a very cool reality that you live in.
And I did actually walk on to a college sport team too. So how about that?
Okay, well, tell us more about that.
It's a sub story. So when I went to college, I wrestled in college at University of Connecticut. And when you lived in the athletic dorms, you know, the athletes that we had, and I doubt the guy would even remember me, but he was my next door neighbor, and I babysat his kid when we were playing basketball. Ray Allen, the basketball player that played with the Celtics and Miami, but he went to University of Connecticut. He was a freshman, I was a freshman. We graduated together, the whole 9 yards. And I just remember you would always go to college 2 weeks earlier than other kids because practice had started. So they were putting together a team of guys and girls that would play against the UConn women's team. And this is when UConn women started their crazy run of being undefeated in 1994 with the Rebecca Lobos. I can just drop names. Nobody probably will even remember this, and they put together a guy squad to play against the girls. And it was from there that I was recognized that I could play basketball. But I knew I would never suit up, just like the Rudy story, but you loved it so much. And I started getting the free Reeboks and the free cool shoes. Then I could show up to like the bars, and I wasn't of age yet, but it's okay. You're a walk-on. You're fine. Don't worry about it. No one's going to say anything. And I had that first taste of what it was like to be in that kind of world. But sports wasn't for me. It was always going to be music and entertainment. And yeah, I dropped everything. No sports ever again.
That's awesome. So you got to live it, though, without the pressure of performing, but you got to live the lifestyle in it.
I lived it.
But
I was the college kid that wore a white T-shirt with a picture of this dog on his T-shirt. Nerd. You know what I mean? I still did everybody's math homework. Still that guy.
That's a noble endeavor.
I just liked it. It was easy.
So we sort of accidentally stumbled upon it, but tell me a clear path of how did you actually get into the arts and entertainment industry?
That's a very good question. So 2003, I was always, let me back up, 1996 to 2000, I was always writing and recording music. Not saying it was good, but I was doing it. And I was able to sell these albums and cassettes at the time to make enough money. But I lived in the corporate world. I moved to Dallas in 2000 for CompUSA back during the dot-com boom. So I was very aware of how the internet worked and then that website worked and technology from that aspect. And I started playing music in Deep Ellum. And that's where like my eyes were just like, oh my God, because Deep Ellum in 2000 or 1996, almost to 2005 was like the epic period of Deep Ellum. And for some reason, people were showing up to see my band. And for some reason, they painted a picture of me and put it on the Curtain Club wall. And I was like, wow, I did all of these cool things. No one else really knows about it. But for me, this fulfilled me that I left the corporate world in 2003, called my parents and said, hey, I'm going to be a professional model, an actor, and a rock star, and I'm quitting, and gave my mom a heart attack. So in 2003, it started.
So wait, you were a model for a while. I think I saw you in a Hawaiian Tropic spread or something, right?
Actually, I was in Hawaiian Tropics now, but I was a judge.
Okay.
But that is funny that you say that as a joke. But it was I left my job in May 2003, and before June, not even a month, I land on the TV show Paradise Hotel on Fox. And it was the reality show of reality shows. It was the only, still to this day, reality show that was filmed in real time. And it was really exciting to be on that show, but I learned a lot. And it was, what I learned from it specifically was that every 15 seconds that I sang, because the character that they made me was the long-haired rocker dude, and they wanted me to bring my guitar on the show, I knew in my head I can't play cover songs. So I re-signed a contract with them, Fox, that says I own the copywriting and the publishing of everything. And I learned every 15 seconds was worth $2,500. So I said, how do I do that the rest of my life? And that's what got me into the movie side, the music side, and where I learned where I couldn't write or record, I could get the job. I could get the client, and I can get anybody to look at me to get them what they needed when it came to putting music onto films. So that's how I got into the film in 2003 world.
So that for that 15-second spot, you were writing original.
No, I was just whoever the cast and crew was, my character would have a guitar. So instead of just talking to them, I would sing to you, and I wrote that song.
Oh, wow. So
and then those little elements I would submit on the music cue sheet. Like, hey, I sang for 5 seconds. So I would just sing to people. Smart. Ended up making around $23,000, something like that, over the course of that thing.
Well, that's amazing. So yeah, that was a high time in Deep Ellum from, like you said, 96 to 05. Did you ever play at the Door?
Never played at the Door. I heard it was a cool place, but never played there.
Well, the Door, we opened in 98,
right,
and we had a 20-year run. And I mean, so many bands came through there that got their start. And
yeah,
we had all the great touring bands and, all that, but a lot of bands got their start in the Battle of Bands and stuff and went on to do great things.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised you never played the Door, but
never
you
played
were
the Door.
Already in at the Curtain Club.
I always played consistently. I was either the Curtain Club and then to Club Clearview. Mm-hmm. And if I played anywhere unique, it was either the Galaxy Club, would be like the offshoot, and then of course Trees. So those are those. And I definitely did a couple. I opened up for people at Gypsy Tea Room. That was fun, but they were never we were never booked there. I knew our home where we could draw over 300 people was always Curtain Club. If I played Curtain Club, I had the biggest draw. If I went to Clearview or Trees I don't know why, same day, different time, people showed up to see us at Curtain Club. So,
yeah, that's amazing. You were quite a force. Now I want to talk about one of your first projects that you did right in there was called Rock for the Troops.
Rock the Troops, Operation Rock the Troops.
Tell me about that.
So 9/11 happened, and like everyone was affected. And by 2003, back then there was no real crazy social media presence in this world. And what you had, the way that musicians would get everyone else to listen to you is we would burn CDs. Right. So I would think back in the day, the way that I started my company after Paradise Hotel was I would get other bands to give me $500. And then I would print, let's say, 10,000 copies of a CD that would have 18 unsigned bands. And then each one of those bands would get 500 copies or 1,000 copies, whatever the deal was. And then they would pass it out to their fans. So now you have 18 bands passing out your music. Everyone's following started to grow. So I took this approach after 9/11, and I called up the Pentagon. Legitimately, there's a division of the Pentagon you can call up called the Armed Force Entertainment. And they hire Armed Force Entertainment. It's not what most people think, the USO, but whenever you see the Harlem Globetrotters, UFC, WWE, all of that comes from the Armed Force Entertainment. It's not the USO. They also send national bands, they send comedians, and they'll send like cheerleaders. So my suggestion is I have a roster of 18 unsigned bands, and we're going to make this magical CD, and our goal is to hand out 100,000 copies to our troops. And the Pentagon went for it because then they would have, well, it turns out 36 bands. I did a double disc CD that they could choose from. And a couple bands were selected to go overseas as well as our band. And then that's what started me touring all overseas for the troops. That's a whole story too. That's a whole 60-minute story on its own. But that's how Operation Rock the Troops, the charity, started. That's how the whole concept was, when I came back from our first 30-day tour to the Pacific, I realized what music really did for them. Where some bands, when they were performing for the troops, they would get to a base and they would be there for, let's say, 6 days. They would only put one concert. I'd get there with my guys and I'd be like, what else are we going to do? Why don't we just play every single day? But then we can offer a different spectacle. We can do an acoustic show. Eventually we started bringing models with us on our tour, like Bob Hope. They started coining me as Bob Hope 2.0, and we were being runway models, go-go dancers, so that when you watched our band, we had this whole production. But before, like if we got to a base on Monday and our concert was on Friday, well, then on Tuesday night, we could have poker night with the veterans, and the girls would be dealers. Then we could have an open jam session. So if any musician or veterans or active duty were musicians, they could bring their instruments and we would have an open jam session, an open mic. Then the next night we would do an acoustic performance, and then we would do the big rock show. So that way we were always doing something, and I filmed it all, and that came out as a movie in 2014.
And what's the title on that one?
Operation Rock the Troops.
Okay,
it's still on Amazon, Hulu, all major platforms, but back then there really wasn't Netflix as we would see it now. We were still getting the CD, mailed to you, and then you mail it back. For us, it was that we were on Comcast automatically, which was in 33 million homes across the US. And then that was a 3-month contract before then it would go to the other platforms. So it was exciting. Everyone was watching our story for the first time.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it sounds like I share a similar timing conundrum as you. It's a good and a bad thing. And it seems like you were doing things right before social media really blew up.
Right before.
And yeah. So that's,
I missed that time.
It took, yeah, but you were talking about, packing Curtain Club with 300 kids. It was probably the old school way, flyers,
100%,
and mailing list and word of mouth. That's how we used to pack clubs.
Absolutely.
From 84 to 98. I mean, in 98, when we opened the door,
right,
we had a mailing list.
Heck yeah.
And we put flyers around town at record shops and
absolutely
and universities. And it was short, but right there is when the internet was really blowing up. It was like 99, 2000. By 2004,
that's when it really started to me.
There was no reason to do mailing or hardly even flyers. Everything was digital.
Everything changed.
And the world changed the way you market,
Right. How you connect with people. See, there's something different when you're walking around Deep Ellum, like I was. I have a backpack on, always a duck of rolled duct tape, always some kind of flyer. But the way that I handed out flyers was, here's a CD that I burnt, and here's a list of all of our upcoming shows. And if you email me, I'll put you on the guest list for free. Because I knew if I could get you through the door, you would actually buy my album where I made 100% of the money, where at the door, it was free. So I knew that value, if we were selling tickets for $12 and I was only getting $6 of that, I'd rather put you on a guest list and pay that $6 because I know you would buy my t-shirt for $20 and I would make more money there. So I would create this list that I would give to the venues. I'm like, I know it's a larger list, but I'll pay my $6, not the $12 per person that walks through, because they were there to see me. And they were like, well, I guess that makes sense. Cool.
Yeah, that's kind of the record release model.
Right. And that's how I was able to always get people in. So if I got people through the door, then their experience would then be with us. It wasn't a worry about money or anything like that. They then got to see a fun show. And what I realized is that my crowd was a drinking crowd. So then that's when I realized, how we can make money is now I could say from this time frame to this time frame, if the numbers in the bar actually increase, I want to start being recognized as the band that can increase your dollar on that backside. So I was able to, like no other band, negotiate with a lot of these other venues because I knew that I was increasing your liquor sales. Where everyone else, it's just, hey, you're there to see a concert, but I can prove from this time to this time frame, I can increase your liquor sales. So that's why I was telling you about how people wanted to be in my band. Wasn't because of the music. It was always because of these other ideas.
Well, you have some really good songs too. I mean, don't.
Oh, no.
You have
you still have to be good. And again, the reason why my band ended up being called the All-Stars is because I knew that I wanted to have the best players in the world, because I was going to be the best at what I did, but they needed to be the best. And yeah, we absolutely wrote some good music and we always put on a show. It's that age-old conversation of like, would you rather be a better complete artist or would you like to be a performer that performs? You know what I'm saying? And what I did was I performed. You wanted to be in our environment. You wanted to be at our show because you didn't know what was going to happen, who was going to be there.
Not only that, but I think you're like a lot of people I talked to even recently is some people, there's, some artists are just so tripped out on the art medium itself, the essence of the paint or the song, you know, the chords and the harmony. But some artists are real message driven and almost like an activist. And I think you are over on that side, that you always have a purpose driven art exploit.
That's a strong word, purpose.
Yeah. It's like it seems they're always either helping the troops or you're helping some cause that the art is really sort of a chariot to carry the project in a way.
Well, I mean, in 2003, I didn't know that. Now, looking back at it, everything that you said is true. If you had to say what was the secret of my supposed success, though everyone balances or measures success differently, you know, because I had a purpose, that's why my music was listened to. And, you know, I had a saying, and it's not the 40 minutes on stage that make you a rock star. It's the 23 hours and 20 minutes off the stage that make you a rock star. And that was the difference between everyone else that I knew in Deep Ellum. I loved always being the guy that had no tattoos, no piercings, but yet all the guys that had tattoos and piercings, like eventually it was the coolest thing for me, and a humbling thing, was that I was welcomed almost into Deep Ellum, where I always felt like an outsider because I was the nerdy dude. And I remember the first thing that I did marketing wise is my band at the time was called Pulling Wool, right? And I was so naive.
I remember that band on the side of the Curtain Club, but I never saw you guys.
That was us. So what I didn't realize was back then, if you can remember, a lot of band flyers had what on the band flyer in the 90s? It was usually a picture of the band. And they were usually in front of a brick wall or on a railroad station.
Right.
Like there's things that we're not supposed to do anymore.
Because Drowning Pool did it or something.
It doesn't matter who did it. Almost everybody did it across the world. It was always, so what I did was if you wanted to come see my band, Pulling Wool, our first flyer was a girl that had no shirt on with boxing gloves, boobs pressed together, and it just said, "We're back." Except it was our first show. Because people wanted to see something. They didn't want to see 5 dudes and, you know, the cliche, the drummers holding the drumsticks and the bass players holding. I never got into that. I was like, let's give them the experience on the flyer and that will make them show up. So we started like doing these shock things. And I remember back then there was mom and pop print shops, you know, we eventually came FedEx Kinko's, but when Kinko's first came around, the first like McDonald's of print shops, no one was printing 24 by 36, and you could get those for $19. You could get like a big. So I was the only guy. If you went to Curtain Club or Club Clearview, you would see my poster at 24 by 36, where everyone else's was 8.5 by 11. So just by that extra paper, it made my credibility bigger, and it again still had nothing to do with the music. That's the 23 hours and 20 minutes off the stage.
Right. Well, that was some smart marketing. So.
I didn't know that.
It's funny when I sit here and I realize you and I only met probably a year and a half ago. I don't know,
right?
2 years ago, whatever. And
we were together the whole time.
But we were in parallel paths in Deep Ellum because I was down there, man. I mean, you know, from '84 to '94, and then I was gone a while, and from '98, you know, for like ever, I was there again all the time, and you and I were like,
I was there 5 days a week. I worked at Curtain Club and Liquid Lounge.
We probably walked by a sidewalk and
100 times. We were at the same concerts.
I probably bumped your backpack. You know.
You had to have, because I mean that was when we were throwing those summer festivals that we'd have down there, and all the venues were included. Those are the greatest damn nights I've ever had in a world of music. You know.
Yeah, Deep Ellum represents a world of opportunity many, many times. I'll get on my Deep Ellum soapbox here for a minute. You know, in the 80s, it changed Dallas.
Right.
In where you're talking about around 2000 and for 10, 15 really great years, it had another 10-year great run.
It was
late 90s, early, yeah. And then you go back to the 20s and 30s when it was like on the national blues circuit tour.
That's where it started.
You know, Memphis, Kansas City, Deep Ellum, New Orleans, Jackson. You know, that was the blues circuit. And then way before that, in the 1870s, is when Deep Ellum was a freedman town. A lot of people don't know this. You know, there was a civil war. The slaves were freed. and a lot of Jewish property owners and all the black freed men built their own community and down in Deep Ellum. And it was like music, art, theater, pawn shops. It was a whole cool city where people were free.
Right.
And so I see the destiny that's on Deep Ellum and still is. It's a place where you get free. Free from what? Well, free from the commercial cloning mentality that the American machine tries to put on people. It's a place you can be an individual, find out who you are, and do great exploits like you've done.
I believe Deep Ellum was my first introduction into truly a diverse world. And I mean, Deep Ellum was diverse back then. And it was a community in a quiet way. You were accepted into it as either one of the artists, or you were considered awesome, still beautiful as these fans, because you never had to go out with any of your friends. You just had to get to Deep Ellum. And if you were there from 8 o'clock to 2 o'clock, you could bar hop in this beautiful, safe environment, music, shows, or just sit down and talk with someone. They had everything you could imagine in Deep Ellum. I mean, it was,
we hear talk about Austin, the music capital of the world, and it's cool and all, but Dallas, first of all, Deep Ellum is the only scene that I know of. I've been to London, I've been to LA, New York, Boston had a scene, way back. Minneapolis had a cool scene, but the only place I know where you could walk to 30 clubs with every genre of music,
right there,
restaurants, shops, and the street scene and the community of the culture on the street scene of diversity that you're talking about. Deep Ellum's, I don't know of anything close. And don't even talk about Bourbon Street, because that's a whole different thing. When I used to go to Bourbon Street in the 70s and 80s, it was super cool.
Right.
There were jazz clubs lying down the street. That was Bourbon Street.
Right.
Now it's it's totally different. It's a carnival. I'm not into it.
Yeah, I'm not. I'll say, everyone told me when I moved to Texas, oh my God, you're going to love Austin. You're going to love Austin. Austin's great. Austin's cool. Now, if we're only talking about music, Austin was a pay to play kind of location, where Deep Ellum was a community. It was the ultimate wanderlust of artists. All artists. And I mean, there were a lot of guys that literally lived in one of those crazy lofts that I had no idea anybody lived in one random night at 3 a.m. Yet somebody is like, someone lives here? And it was just concrete floors and draperies and paint and everything you could imagine. And then, hey, will you mind? I'm going to have an art gallery opening. Would you play? Hell yeah. Because you didn't get booked. You lived there. You breathed there. Deep Ellum was just different.
Yes.
It wasn't the Nashville. What do they call it? What's that one main strip and everyone plays in Nashville?
I'm blanking on it.
Yeah, it's
very historic.
But when you go there too, everyone and their mother moves to Nashville thinking you're going to be in Nashville, but then you hire the same 5 songwriters. In Deep Ellum, every guy that was playing in that venue, from Wednesday to a Sunday, from 7 o'clock time slot to the 12 o'clock last headliner time slot, were writing their own music. There weren't 5 people alone in Dallas. That's what always made it different. And where I thought LA was great too, LA was a destination as opposed to its own scene. It was definitely seen during the early 90s, during that mecca of metal. But come on, Seattle, we all know that Seattle had that mecca for the little bit when it goes to the grunge, right? But Dallas was all genres. It was everything. It was a community of people. It wasn't a sound.
That's true. You're right. I mean, the diversity, the originality, the Deep Ellum reality that everybody can become somebody. And that started long ago. I mean, the Sounds of Deep Ellum, the album that Island Records put out in the late 80s, it was 10 bands that all came out of the Deep Ellum scene.
Wow.
And that really should happen every decade. There should be a compilation of the top bands in Deep Ellum. There's been some attempts at it. But now, I mean, let's face some reality. Modern day Deep Ellum is very commercialized. There are several good venues that still have the great bands. But I will say, I think the opportunity, because what we were championing was anybody could have a chance. So when you come to a venue and you're not pressured to necessarily draw a lot of crowd or sell a lot of at the bar,
Right.
but we're there to give you a platform and a showcase.
That's absolutely correct.
An original artist, whether
Right.
it was a painter, a singer, songwriter, rock band, or a theatrical performance. Then you created, it was an incubator for free expression on an artistic exploration,
Right.
not hindered by commercialism at all.
Yeah, you would want to walk. Like, I loved walking into Curtain Club one night and see Polyphonic Spree with, like, what? How many members did they have on that stage?
Too many.
Right. And then I could go across the street and there's Club Clearview, and I could go see Jibe, and what is Joe climbing on? You know, and what is he doing? That's an amazing thing. And then you could just walk down the street and hear the singer-songwriters and some of the guys that I grew up from, the Josh Good Band, Zach Fuentes. There's a whole bunch of different people from then to now that had that style, you know, before like the Jason Mrazes ever showed up. You could see that. And then, oh, by the way, Drowning Pool is right down the street. Where Drowning Pool was Drowning Pool, but when they got signed, it finally felt like one of our own made it, you know? It was like,
That's right. That's how it's,
someone made it.
that's the satisfaction moment.
But everyone made it when they made it. And that's what made that band. And still to this day, I love Drowning Pool in that regard, is that cool, one of us made it.
Well, yeah, and making it, that sparks another thought to me is they did make it on a national, international level, and a lot of bands out of Deep Ellum have. But, you know, the concept of making it, I think you kind of touched on a minute ago, but, you know, if a local band gets a gig and they've been rehearsing and they can bring 200 of their friends to play at the Profit Bar or, you know, the Door or the Curtain Club or whatever, that's making it in a way. You know, we used to have on our website at the Door, we'll help fulfill your rock and roll fantasy, you know, play the Battle of the Bands. And, you know, Sarah Jaffe came out of a Battle of the Bands.
There you go.
At the Door. St. Vincent played a Battle of the Bands at the Door.
Right.
Leon Bridges got his record deal at the Profit Bar Jam Session with R.C. Williams. You know, so, but even the bands that never get discovered, it's like if you can pack a club for one night and all your friends see you up on stage rocking, and the band breaks up the next day, that was still making it.
Did something.
To a point because it was fun.
Right.
And you went out on a limb and you practiced, you worked, and you made it happen, and you got your moment of rock stardom, you know, and it's a cool thing.
You literally are creating something from your own mind and spirit, and then brave enough to stand on that stage and let the world hear you, and then people show up to see you. You can't have a better form of success. But then, of course, it does eventually get to your brain, what's next? What's next? And then what I've realized and what you coined, the only way to get to that next level is you had to have purpose. It's the hidden thing, because a lot of guys got too into the music, and then you could see where, like, I'm 46 now. I still can go play in Deep Ellum and draw 200-300 people. Like,
you're 46. Wow, I thought you were 36. I don't know if we don't have anybody over 40 on this show.
I'm an old man.
Yeah. Well,
but the point is that it's I'm still doing it, but yet when you did it back then, Deep Ellum, man, it felt like there were other people there that lifted you up. Mm-hmm. There were, you know what I mean? I always knew that I would get about 40 to 50 of the other musicians would show up and see me. Didn't matter if they liked me.
No,
I know not everybody liked my music or would buy my album, but you're playing, you came to my show. I'm going to come to your show. I think that's what's missing in music in general now. Because going from there to social media, I always ask half these people that have 1 million views on social media, I'm like, when you playing live next? But why do they have to play live? They're making so much money with these pre-recorded tracks and all this stuff. I'm not knocking it, but they do all of this other stuff. But to me, what they're missing is you might have, I'm going to say something bold. You might have 1 million followers, make more money than me, and I'm not going to compare our styles of music or whatnot. And I might have 5,000 friends, but I would almost put up money against almost anyone that I'll still outdraw a real human to come see me. Because people, in my mind, those new generations of people that I'm talking about, and there's nothing wrong with what they do, I think they're missing what it means to actually connect with someone with art.
Well, yeah, that live theater of being at the show and connecting with your audience. Well, that's the perishable beauty of a art process with your audience. That can't be replaced, but it is endangered.
I think it's also one step before that. It's going to Deep Ellum the week before your show, 2 weeks before your show, and still talking to people about your music where they wanted to listen to you and you wanted to tell them. And you're also there, thirdly, most importantly, supporting others. When you do all of those three things, that's when people showed up. And I used to, again, the 23 hours, 20 minutes, that's what made you a rock star, because you weren't just waiting for someone to come see you and ego. It was, I want to support everyone, and I think that's
beautiful. Yeah. Well, you're talking about building relationships before the gig and they get to know you. So they want to see you play.
That to me is the art. That's art.
That's really cool.
That's the ultimate stage.
Yes. I mean, a lot of people go see bands just because they know the people in the bands. The music is somewhat secondary, I dare say.
You don't have to dare. It's true.
So let's switch over to a project that you've done that I witnessed the video and everything about. Tell us about your whole endeavor where you have veterans that have suffered from trauma, the war, and there's different ways to call that, PTS, whatever, right? So tell me about that project. What was the name of it again? And I saw this awesome video that you guys made at the end of the camp.
Oh, so Operation Rock the Troops, our charity. We have two programs. JC All-Stars, our band, right? And that means we tour anywhere and everywhere in the world that the Pentagon wants us to, or other military charities. That's one. Program two is called Highway Home, and that is our songwriting healing camp. And it's what I discovered back when we were on the tours, and really discovered in 2016 when we were asked to perform in Diego Garcia, which is in the middle of the Indian Ocean. But it was there, especially, that I found that if you can take a veteran, sit them down, and without them realizing, like kind of sleight of hand, and get them, which is obviously a difficult thing to do, to truly talk about what's bothering them, what they would like to do to get rid of that, and what they're willing to do stepwise, they're almost in a way writing lyrics to something that happened with them, and they can actually release it. That if I could then have them write a song about it, where now they're learning about the music and whatnot, they don't think that they're talking about something that hurts them so much. And naturally, it's literally leaving their body, that the only place and the last place for them to actually push it out is then on stage. So the singer-songwriting camp has 3 steps: the therapy session, the actual songwriting session, and then the third one is perform it live. So we have now filmed 3 full 1-hour documentaries. One where we took 4 veterans to Alaska with our charity Battle Dogs. We took 6 veterans to Dublin, Ireland, part of the Texas Red Dirt Pub Crawl, and they went through a camp. And then in Deep Ellum at Will Call with my good buddy JR, we did the Dallas camp, where we had 8 veterans and 8 local Deep Ellum rock stars, all coming in to help the veterans. Again, all 3, the process: the therapy session, the songwriting session, and then they had to perform the song live. So that's what we're working on right now.
I mean, I love the way it's almost like songwriting therapy.
100%.
We all have heard that if you open up and talk about it, it's going to help. And that's, whether it's teenagers struggling or a victim of divorce or whoever, right? There's always that reality. And so it's so smart, because you have created a medium for them to actually do it in an artistic, cool, productive way, rather than just, we're going to go in this room and talk about, the problem. It's like so contrived and limitation on the process, right? So you created this great place. I remember the video was so beautifully done, and the song, you guys, the product of one of the camps in Alaska, was just an awesome song.
It was. Let me tell you, that was probably, if you were really there, like a lot of people haven't seen the full movie, and we're actually re-editing it right now because we did more. We didn't realize what we were filming. We thought it was going to be just like a nice long promo video to let all of the people that have donated, like, hey, this is what the veterans went through. Here's a real, authentic, unedited kind of version of everything. But when we finished and we wrote that song, even though to get to that song was very difficult, because what do you still have in music? You have ego. Now, ego we need it first off in life, right? It's like good cholesterol, bad cholesterol. You still need ego. And what it means is that when you're songwriting with 4 people, will the word that I said or the phrase that I say make it to the final script? That's ego. Mm-hmm. So people have to learn, even in songwriting, like, a good way of saying it, one of my meditation techniques that I do, it's called the heart of the rose. And one thing that it teaches you is that when you go up a rose and you're looking at the rose and you're meditating on it, it's just like life, that along the way of the stem, you're going to have many thorns, right? And then as you go up and you start to get around the bloom or of the flower itself, some of those petals are going to fall off, just like the people that you meet, opportunities, divorce, whatever you want to say. But what happens when those petals fall off? You get closer and closer to your core, your purpose. So if you believe from the bottom of the stem all the way to the top that your journey is to get to your purpose, then you'll have a successful kind of push out there. That's what I try to put into the whole thing with the veteran, is the whole thing of trying to get people to realize that it's okay to let things go. It's okay for a rose petal to fall off. It's okay to get stung by one of the thorns or, pricked by it. That's life. It's supposed to happen. But everyone else was just so, if you hang out with a couple of veterans, you'll find out they hide everything. Why would they want to tell you? You didn't live it. You didn't experience. It's not our place to even ask them what they experienced. They'll tell you when they want to tell you, kind of thing. But when you put it with music or any kind of art, it literally was kind of like, the best way of saying it, sleight of hand. They didn't realize they were talking about that. That to me is the beauty of art and music. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So for anyone listening or that knows a veteran or veterans listening, it's not a trick. It's just that it's a way that can open your soul up.
Right.
And it's a safe environment.
That's exactly correct.
Because you're among peers.
That's right.
And so I've got your next album cover in my mind.
Okay.
Because you're so philosophical. And so we've got you in a robe, and a couple of columns, we've got a dove flying out of your hand, and you're, so if you hear the album, you're going to learn the philosophy of pacing.
That's kind of funny.
Well, I'm serious. I like your philosophical side. Okay.
I believe, and again, it's the same thing that I said of the marketing that I did in 2003, from having the girl pushing up and saying "we're back" on a flyer, right? That's the same thing as what I'm doing here with veterans, in the regard that you have to it's not everything has to be A to B. It's not playing checkers, it's playing chess. And I need you to experience something first before I need you to experience the second thing. And in my mind, when you're doing that, when you're sitting down and you're like, hey, we're about to talk about something, but we're doing it to write lyrics, you're now relieved of, oh, I'm just going to sit here on a couch while you're over here on a pad writing something down. It's you. And I used to say, or I still say, I'm sorry, songwriting camps or the healing camps, it's the only pill that heals more than one person. Because when you sing a song, someone else in the audience now has the opportunity to be like, I'm not alone. And that artist, that veteran now, when they sing it, can now realize, holy crap, I wasn't alone this whole time. And now Ben and Becky and Tiffany, all of these people can now resonate with what they said. And they're now talking without ever saying a word, just through music, just through the art.
Well, plus when you put some vets together and say, hey, let's write about our process and get to know, your new friends. And that in itself is going to be a very synergistic healing for everybody too, because they've gone through it together.
We're doing one thing so sometimes when you do the songwriting healing camps, the veteran it's just one veteran, one singer songwriter. But then you have the camps that are groups. And when you have that group mentality, obviously they're veterans. What does a veteran remember the most? And I would say, I wasn't a veteran, so I can't say this, but of the guys that I've talked to, they understand when you say, hey, I have a mission for you. Can you handle this? They will do whatever it takes to complete that mission with no one left behind. That's their mentality. So by saying, hey guys, I'm going to give you 7 days to talk about some feelings, write them down, and perform it live, I just simplified and said, here's the mission. That's it. Because they can understand, in my mind, I would think they understand that process. That's how I wanted to give that to them, you know?
Very good. Well, the word mission is a great word. The word purpose is a great word. They're thrown around a lot.
Right.
But I believe I've found in experientially that when we have a purpose, we have a mission, we're part of something greater than ourselves, we actually have happiness.
That's where happiness lives.
And I don't know any other way to actually find it. I know people that are super wealthy, super famous, super whatever duper, you know, but they're not always happy unless they have some purpose or passion about.
I mean, I feel like I've now read this in like 30 books, but then when you sit across from someone, or you're on the subway and you see someone, or you're on a plane and you see someone, and you wonder, do they understand this logic? And even when you do understand that logically with what you said, can you apply it day to day?
As I just said that, I was thinking this, you know, people that are hearing that or thinking about that. I mean, we hear it all the time. I'm not the first to say anything like that. But the other thing is there's a pressure that comes in life. You know, you're sitting around, you don't like your life all that much. You like see all these great, successful, famous people everywhere doing these great, purposeful missions. And, so really sometimes the purpose or the mission could be so simple, like helping your city block, you know, be the Mother Teresa of your neighborhood or something, right?
I love when you say Mother Teresa, because her line, you know, even though I may not say perfect, but the essence of it is that if you see something wrong with the world, first sweep in front of your own doorstep. Okay. Because when you can take care of your own house, whether it's literally your own house with other people or it's your own personal internal house, it's only then can you take care of someone else. That's why when we're in a plane, you have to put on the oxygen mask for you first, not the kid next to you, because if you can't breathe, you can't help them. So you have to sweep in front of your own doorstep. So that simple goal that you're talking about, like maybe, you know, you don't have to start a big cancer charity, or you don't have to start a big veteran organization. Just find one thing you care about and do something about it. I swear your world would change. And you're right about that. That's where happiness lives.
Can I be the guy that starts the How to Drive in Dallas school?
Oh, we need that. Let me tell you.
So let's switch to your project that you just went to Europe. Okay, now speaking of vets and missions, you know, veterans, let's say, and missions. I know you just were in Europe and you're shooting a documentary movie project. And these are with World War II veterans on location of where they actually engaged in their mission to fight for freedom.
That's correct.
So tell me all about that one.
I met an amazing veteran. His name's Andy Biggs. He's in Boston. He runs one of the biggest nonprofit charities, not biggest, but what I love to say big is he puts on a big vet run, and he does these vet runs in 19 other cities. But in Boston itself, the JC All-Stars with Rock the Troops would always play their big events. And I found out, you know, we became friends, that he has this M1 rifle, the same rifle that World War II guys used. And he has this story about his grandfather and his dad. Like everyone in his family was kind of in the military. But he had this idea of, what if I got all of these World War II veterans to sign this M1 Grand rifle and listen to all of their stories? So he starts traveling around the country. And as he's doing this, he realizes, well, what if I took a couple of these guys back? So we first went to Italy with 2 World War II veterans in 2019. And then I made a short little trailer, and we were able to raise enough money to then take 16 World War II veterans back to Battle of the Bulge in Bastogne in Belgium. And then COVID hit. And now after coming out of COVID, we just took 4 World War II veterans back to Holland, Bastogne in Belgium, Germany, and Normandy. And on this recent trip, each one of the veterans went back to a different location that they either liberated, or whether they were in the 82nd or they were in the 101st, that their division basically did something impactful. And one of the guys, he's an African-American, Marvin Gilmore, was one of the few black men that landed on Utah Beach, and that's still alive today. and he is about to turn 98 years old. And on the trip, they surprised him with this location that there's this one story, and I do forget the proper name of this. I was so busy filming that I didn't take everything down. But there's this one house that 11 African-American men that were fighting right near Normandy, basically, not Normandy, this was somewhere else, where they were brought in, they were comforted, they got a little relaxation, they ate dinner at this table, but then they were found out by the Nazis, they were captured, and they were massacred. And it was extremely violent and extremely bad. Well, Marvin is probably going to be one of the last African Americans who then got a chance to sit at the exact table in the same exact room where this person that owns this house never changed that room, because they would never want, from that night in 1945, they've never changed this room. And we interview him, and what he says, I mean, right now it's just giving me chills thinking about how he talked about he didn't fight one war. He was fighting two wars. Segregation was still real. And he knew, and he was one of the smart ones, if you want to call it that he knew that if he was drafted, he would automatically be sent to the front line. That's where they were sending them. But if he volunteered, and he volunteers when he was 16 years old, he would be able to choose at least where he went. But he still goes to the front line, still walks onto Utah Beach, still does everything that he does. This man, he ended up writing a book that's a bestseller, and wow, the things that he did were just amazing. But I'll say this, in Europe, we walked right down the same exact pathway from where like he was, you know what I'm saying? We walked backwards, and I'm filming him, and you can see his eyes have the flashbacks of the men that he saw dying in front of him, or where the German was that he was shooting at, or what. And it was insane to see him walking out on Utah Beach. It was just like, it just gives me chills, you know? I would say one of the other guys, Roger, was in the, I believe it's the 82nd Airborne, and he was dropped in, like his drop zone was just past the beach. And then their job was to kind of come back in from the other side. And we went and found where exactly he dropped, right? And crazy as this sounds, there's a woman that still lives in the town that was there that saw the paratroopers flying in on the same day. And whether she can recall, like if it was him that she saw or whatnot, they meet. And she invites them into her house. They're both like 98 years old, right? And they have this most amazing conversation, but it was in French, so I don't know exactly. But to see him the whole trip to then this trip talk, you see him light up. And it was just amazing to see, like, what are the chances of that even happening? And that happened actually in Italy too, where one of the veterans, Rocco, my good buddy, he was in Tremisoli in Italy, a town that he helped liberate. And while we were there, I'm interviewing him in the town center, and I hear this other woman in the background going nuts. Hey, I can't understand, whatever she's saying, right? And I said, Rocco, we should go over there and see what's going on. And we walk over to this lady, and I still have the camera on, and she's like, Mamma mia. It was her mother. They took a photo together in 1945. So we put Rocco in his wheelchair, and we're wheeling him down this cobblestone, and the two meet. And you're just sitting there. You're like, you gotta be kidding me.
That's amazing.
75 years later.
That is so
after liberating that town.
Transcendent. And you know what's funny? I'm working on a couple of movie projects right now. And what you're talking about is when you go to document a historical thing, this major healing took place.
Oh, it's insane.
I mean, this is like all these years later, but it was trapped in a time capsule. Right. And then her daughter shows a picture. That's just tremendous.
How does that, you can't write that.
So quickly, I have one more question. We're coming to the end of our
amazing time
train here. So what's the title of that project? How do people find out about that project?
Well, the project, like making movies, I mean, we put out it's called The Rifle, The Journey Back to the Forgotten Front. That's the Italy version. Then it's The Rifle, Battle of the Bulge, 75th anniversary. And what happened there was insane. And it included, we want to say an SS Nazi, but you can't say that. But literally a Tiger tank commander meets the guy that his division blew up his tank in one of the last battles in Battle of the Bulge. Can you imagine 5 years later to look across and be like, it was you that took down my tank? And that moment happened. And I interviewed that Nazi. I don't want to call him that, I guess, but that's what he was.
That's what they were.
But it just still sounds weird to say that, like, that word, and actually it directly mean a guy in the 1940s from Germany who was a Tiger tank commander, like one of their biggest tanks. Anyway, that was the Rifle Belgium. This one, I don't know what we're going to call it, because now we have an opportunity to make it an actual Netflix series. So we want to repackage the whole thing. And now I'm looking for investors for that, because we now have 200 of the last conversations ever heard from the greatest generation, and no one's ever seen them.
So the project's called The Rifle.
The Rifle.
And subtitles of each chapter, each episode. Location.
Right.
And you're working on basically a pitch for that now.
Yep.
Okay. So I have one more question. We're coming up on our 60 minutes.
Bring it.
It's been great. So I ask every guest this: what about God? And this question is sponsored by God and Russell David Hobbs' book that's out. Why? Why are we here? Why do we suffer? Why is there so much confusion? There are answers in this book. So I'm doing my plug, but while you think, so tell me what you think about the subject of God.
I love the subject. I could say, just because we have limited time, I've studied many religions.
You've got God in 3 minutes.
I could do it. I've been to the Vatican as an altar boy. I've said mass with the Pope, said mass with underneath the catacombs of the church. I'm a freak. If you can't tell, the name of my company is 1307 Productions. And if most people don't know what 1307 is, October 13, 1307 was the date that King Philip and the Pope tried to basically massacre all of the Knights Templar. So you can see there's the 1307, there's the old Templar cross. But I always looked at 1307 as a word of saying legendary. And why does that matter? And why does that come back to God? I believe simply that God always has been with us. God is with us. We never have to look for God, because God is inside us. But that's exactly why so many people have confusion, because it's the simplest of answers. If you're having a problem, you have to look inside. You cannot blame anybody. God, how many times do they say, how come there's only one set of footprints in the sand? Because I was carrying you. He's literally carrying you. But God always wanted one thing for us, and that was to have a purpose. Have a purpose and leave a legacy. And that legacy means the next people that come behind us, one will learn, as well as one will be able to see that this is what they need to do to progress society. So I believe God is hidden right inside us, but he's not hiding. He's there for us.
That's beautiful. I like that. You said something that's very interesting to me too, and that is the catacombs. I went to the catacombs outside Rome.
Right.
And, there's like the Appian Way.
Yeah.
And you go down to the catacombs, and the early Christians would bury the saints, the brethren, the believers, in these tombs, and they would, embalm them and wrap them and put flowers, and they'd all be buried with the symbol of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit symbol, and they're like this, and to show, because there was much persecution.
Yeah.
But somehow they got that done anyway, and they had those burials. Did you go down in the catacombs?
100%. I've been down.
Isn't that beautiful?
Catacombs.
Like that whole
filmed
trip
down there,
like,
and it was eerie.
Oh, really? They let you take cameras down there?
No.
Oh, you did it. Okay, well, good. That's good. I mean, that's even better.
Yeah, those are different days when I would do different sneaky things. But
yeah.
I was always a camera guy.
Well, to me, it's God is real. He's alive. I think he came in a body. He showed us how cool he is. He hugged the lepers. He forgave the prostitutes, and he called the religious leaders snakes. And he died for us and resurrected. And the resurrection's true. All we have to do is receive him and believe, and we can be forever. It's like the great reunion, right?
Right.
But our world's covered with religion and, distortions of the character of God and people misrepresenting God. And a lot of people are in this post-Christian world that we live in, or, scoff at the reality that there could even be a God.
Right.
And it's very I mean, it's heartbreaking or sad in a way, but I know that, like you say, he's with us and he ends up showing everybody what they need to know.
I'll say this. God gave us his greatest gift that he gave us was free will. So when we talk about suffering, that's the free will that God gave you. You don't have to suffer. Of course, there's things that happen to people that you got a bad hand of the deck. You know what I mean? It is what it is. There's nothing you can say, right? But when you're given the gift of free will, you have the opportunity to choose and decide. The struggle that most people never get taught or understand is that truly the balance of life comes from balancing your internal and external desires. When you're younger, we want external. We want to be cool. Everyone look at me. I don't want to be a loser. I want to do this. I want to make this person happy. I'm going to buy this car and that car. Hence why some of those rock stars or super wealthy people are never happy. It's because that balance has to come from your internal. That's where purpose lives. That's where God lives. God wants you to see everything that's out there and do everything you can, but remember to balance. And I think that's where happiness, success, and every great platform lives off of that balance.
That's a great word. Now, it is my show, so I have to get the last word.
Get it.
But you've been great. So good to talk and see you today, Mathew JC. Check out what this guy's doing, the causes, the missions, the purpose, the projects are beautiful. And thank you for joining us today for another episode, and we'll see you next week on the Russell Hobbs Show, baby.